So you look out your back window at, your mature oak tree, maybe it's got this green ivy climbing up the trunk, and you probably just see a peaceful, static landscape.
Right, it looks like a painting.
Exactly, a nice, quiet painting. But according to the files we are unpacking today, that yard is actually, well, it's a slow-motion biological war zone.
It really is.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking at a super specialized stack of articles and technical blog posts. These were written by John Constantine. He's a local expert at tree service perfection.
Which is a professional tree and ivy removal service out in West Covina, California.
Yeah, in LA County. And our mission today is to decode the hidden structural physics, the aggressive biological parasites, and honestly, the very real threats of catastrophic property damage that are just masquerading as everyday landscaping.
It's wild how much is happening right under our noses.
It totally is. Okay, let's unpack this because the sources immediately take aim at a plant that, most of us just associate with classic, distinguished architecture.
English ivy. Yeah, the sources frame it not as this charming aesthetic choice, but literally as a highly aggressive parasite.
A parasite.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is the data cited from the California Invasive Plant Council. It illustrates this brutal underground competition for resources.
Right, because they're fighting for water.
Exactly. In environments like Southern California, where, water is already scarce, the ivy has this dense, shallow root mat, and it essentially intercepts rainfall and irrigation before it can ever penetrate deep enough to reach the actual tree's feeder roots.
So is stealing the water. It's like having a toxic roommate who looks great on Instagram, but behind closed doors, they are quietly intercepting all your groceries and just letting you starve.
That is a perfect way to put it.
But the visual is so deceiving, right?
Yeah.
Because you look at the trunk covered in those lush leaves and you just assume the tree is thriving.
Right. You see green and think healthy.
Yeah, but it takes a shift in perspective to realize you're actually looking at the parasite's success, not the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And the underground theft is just the beginning. The text goes into some crazy detail about what the vines do to the trunk itself.
Yeah, because we tend to conceptualize tree bark as this dead suit of armor, just a solid wall.
Like a rhino's skin or something.
Right, exactly. But in reality, bark is highly dynamic. It contains these tiny pores called lenticels.
Lenticels.
Yeah, and they facilitate gas exchange. So the bark must remain relatively dry to maintain its structural integrity, to act as a barrier against pathogens.
It needs to breathe.
It has to breathe. But when English ivy creeps up a trunk, its overlapping leaves and that dense network of adventitious roots, they create a permanent, dark, damp microclimate directly against the wood.
Oh, man. So it completely smothers those lenticels.
It does. The bark just can't breathe.
So it's basically wrapped in a wet sponge year-round.
Which creates an optimal incubation zone for wood decay fungi.
Because fungi love the dark and the damp.
Exactly. The trapped moisture softens the suberin. That's the waxy protective substance in the bark. And once that barrier is compromised, fungal hyphae literally penetrate the bark and secrete enzymes.
Wait, they secrete enzymes to do what?
To actively break down the lignin and cellulose inside the wood.
So they're dissolving the tree.
Yeah, the fungi are dissolving the tree's structural tissue to feed themselves, and at the same time, the softened, rotting wood emits chemical signals.
Like a beacon.
Right, a beacon that attracts wood-boring insects. They tunnel into the vascular cambium and essentially destroy the tree's circulatory system from the outside in.
That is horrifying.
Yeah.
But the biological rotting is really only half the problem here. Because when you combine that compromised, rotting internal structure with the external forces of nature, the situation shifts from this slow biological decline into an immediate physical crisis.
A catastrophic one, yeah.
The arborists in the text refer to this as the sail effect.
This is such a critical concept in tree biomechanics. So a healthy tree canopy is designed by evolution to be porous.
Right, it's got gaps.
Yeah, branches sway, leaves flutter, and high-velocity ones just pass right through the aerodynamic gaps in the foliage.
Like wine through a screen door.
Exactly. But when a tree is heavily infested, the ivy weaves all those individual branches together into a solid, impenetrable mass. It closes all the gaps.
Wait, so instead of a tree being an aerodynamic structure, the ivy essentially turns the canopy into a giant rotting parachute.
Yes. That's exactly it. The canopy acts exactly like a ship's sail. It captures the massive kinetic energy of the wind. And, that force doesn't just disappear.
It has to go somewhere.
Right. The physics dictate it must transfer somewhere, so it travels straight down the trunk to the base. And if we look at the specific environmental profile of the West Covina area outlined in the sources, you have a perfect storm for structural failure.
Because of the dirt.
Yeah, the region is characterized by really heavy, compacted clay soil.
Well, wait. If the clay is so compacted that it severely restricts deep root growth, how did a massive 60-foot tree manage to grow there and survive for decades in the first place?
It's a great question. Basically, instead of a deep taproot going straight down, trees in these dense clay environments are forced to develop broad, shallow root plates.
Oh, so they spread out horizontally.
Exactly, just beneath the surface to gather whatever moisture they can. And normally, these shallow plates can stabilize a healthy tree just fine.
Under normal conditions, sure.
Right. However, the region's weather patterns introduce extreme stress. You have these brutal summer droughts that dehydrate the soil and weaken the roots.
And then, bam, the winter rains.
Exactly. They are routinely followed by heavy winter rains. The sudden influx of water saturates that dense clay, and it turns incredibly slick and muddy.
So it's basically lubricating the shallow root plate.
It acts as a perfect slip plane. So now factor in the Santa Ana winds.
Oh, those winds are notorious.
Very highly pressurized, sustained gusts hitting that impenetrable ivy sail at the top of the tree. The massive rotational force transfers down the trunk to roots that are, sitting in wet, slippery clay.
And they're probably already compromised by the fungal rot we just talked about.
Exactly. The roots simply lose their mechanical grip. The entire root plate levers out of the ground, and you experience catastrophic, explosive failure.
It's terrifying. I mean, the text mentions a 10,000-pound eucalyptus crushing a garage.
Mhm.
We aren't just talking about a heavy branch falling here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about the equivalent weight of 3 mid-sized sedans just dropping out of the sky onto a residential roof. So if the stakes are really that high, a homeowner needs to know how to evaluate what's happening in their yard.
They have to be proactive.
Right. How do you distinguish between a tree that is just struggling from a hot summer and one that is structurally doomed?
Well, the sources emphasize active seasonal inspection. Homeowners must look for specific mechanical and biological indicators of failure.
What's the biggest red flag?
One of the clearest signs is the presence of large sections of deadwood in the upper canopy during the spring flush.
So when everything else is turning green.
Right. If the rest of the tree is pushing out new leaves and one major leader branch is just totally bare, the vascular connection to that section has been severed.
They also highlight deep vertical cracks running down the main trunk, which is terrifying if you think about the sheer weight being supported.
It's essentially a massive stress fracture in a primary load-bearing pillar.
But the detail that stands out the most to me is the appearance of mushrooms at the base of the trunk.
Ah, yeah. The mushrooms.
Because you might walk out after a heavy rain, see a little cluster of mushrooms by your oak tree, and think, no, it's just a cute, harmless garden detail.
A little woodland fairy moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But arborists view those mushrooms as terminal indicators.
They really are. They're basically the tree's tombstone. They are the fruiting bodies of a much larger, completely unseen subterranean fungal network.
The mushroom is just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. The actual organism is the mycelium, which is this web of root-like threads that has been digesting the tree's root system for months or, even years underground.
Wow. So it's been eating the tree this whole time.
Yeah, and the mushroom only appears when the fungus is finally ready to reproduce and release spores. By the time it breaches the surface, the structural integrity of the root crown is already deeply compromised.
This raises an important question about when a natural asset crosses the line and becomes a strict liability. Because once you see those fruiting bodies or those deep vertical cracks, there's no treatment protocol, right?
No.
You can't just trim off the dead canopy branches and throw some fertilizer on the roots to bring it back.
No, the decay is terminal. The internal wood is totally brittle, the center of gravity is shifting, and the tree is absolutely guaranteed to come down.
It's just a matter of when.
Right. Furthermore, we have to consider the hidden underground threats outlined in the text, specifically in older neighborhoods where mature root systems have been expanding for decades.
What are the roots doing down there?
Well, roots exhibit a behavior called hydrotropism.
Meaning they follow the water.
Exactly. They actively grow toward moisture gradients. So In an older West Covina property, a tiny condensation leak from an aging plumbing line acts as a massive beacon.
Oh, no.
The roots migrate straight to the pipe, wrap around it, and as they grow in diameter, they exert immense hydraulic pressure.
Enough to break it.
Enough to easily lift solid concrete foundations and completely crush old cast iron sewer lines.
Okay, so you've done the inspection, you've identified the dead canopy, maybe spotted the fungal fruiting bodies, and you know the roots are aggressively migrating toward your home's foundation. The tree is dead, it has to go.
It has to go.
But the instinct for plenty of property owners facing a massive specialized bill is to try and save a few bucks by handling it themselves.
The DIY route, always a bad idea here.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I have to push back on the warnings against DIY removal. We live in an era where you can learn to replace a transmission or build an entire deck via online tutorials. So why shouldn't a capable homeowner just rent a rusty commercial chainsaw, cut a directional wedge, and handle a dead tree over the weekend? How hard can it be?
Well, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration consistently ranks tree care among the most dangerous professions in the entire country for a reason.
Yeah, the most dangerous.
Yes. Felling a tree is a highly complex exercise in applied physics. The statistics surrounding severe injuries and fatalities from amateur tree removal usually involve catastrophic falls, improper equipment use, and struck by accident.
Struck by, meaning the tree hits you.
Yeah. And when a homeowner watches a quick felling tutorial online, they're generally watching a professional cut a green, living tree.
Oh, and a dead tree is different.
A dead, decaying tree behaves entirely differently.
Because it doesn't have the moisture content to flex or bend.
Exactly. It has lost its elasticity. The fibers in deadwood are extremely brittle. When you cut into a healthy tree to create a felling hinge, the wood fibers hold together long enough to guide the tree slowly to the ground.
Like a real hinge.
Right. But when you cut a dead tree, those brittle fibers often snap prematurely. It can result in this terrifying phenomenon called barber chairing.
Barber chairing, what is that?
It's where the trunk basically splits vertically up the middle under tension, and the back half kicks violently backward directly toward the person holding the saw.
Oh, wow. That is a nightmare scenario. And the decay isn't going to be perfectly uniform inside the trunk either, right?
Exactly, which means the center of gravity is entirely unpredictable. A homeowner might calculate their notch perfectly to drop the tree onto the lawn, completely unaware that the right hemisphere of the trunk is hollowed out by rot.
So it doesn't fall straight.
No. The uneven weight distribution causes the tree to twist off the stump and crash sideways into a neighboring house or a power line.
And suddenly the cost of a crushed roof or a massive medical bill instantly eclipses the price of just hiring a professional.
Absolutely.
Plus, the sources explain that professionals rarely just chop at the base and yell timber anyway. They rely on surgical dismantling.
Right. They utilize advanced rigging techniques that rely on friction and weight distribution. An arborist assesses the tension and compression of every major branch before making a single cut.
They're doing math up there.
They are. They use specialized friction cylinders attached to the base of the tree, running high-strength ropes through blocks in the canopy. This allows a single ground worker to safely control the descent of a 500-pound piece of timber.
Just lowering it down gently.
Exactly. They dismantle the sail piece by piece, engineering the removal so that thousands of pounds of wood are lowered directly to the ground without shattering a driveway or destroying the surrounding landscape.
So what does this all mean for the aftermath?
The cleanup is just as critical.
Right, because the professionals do the rigging, the massive dead wood is on the ground, and the ivy is stripped away. But if a property owner decides to save a little money by declining the stump grinding service, just leaving the stump to rot naturally, are they actually creating a new, invisible problem for their yard?
Oh, 100%. Leaving a decaying stump is akin to leaving out a welcome mat for subterranean pests.
Like termites.
Especially termites. As that dense wood breaks down below the soil line, it provides an abundant, localized food source for them. The colony establishes itself within the stump, multiplies rapidly, and once those stump resources are depleted, they simply migrate across the yard to the next available cellulose source.
Which is usually the structural framing of the homeowner's house.
Exactly.
You're basically giving them a staging ground right in your yard.
You are. And in addition to pests, that decaying root system continues to harbor those wood-rotting fungi we discussed earlier.
Right, the mycelium's still down there.
Yeah, fungi like armillaria can form rhizomorphs.
Rhizomorphs.
They're these tough, shoestring-like structures that literally travel through the soil from the dead stump to infect the root systems of the healthy trees remaining on the property.
So it spreads.
It absolutely spreads. That's why professional stump grinding utilizes heavy machinery to mill the wood down well below the soil grade. It physically destroys the root crown entirely, eradicating the food source and halting the spread of localized disease.
Wow. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources also dive into a complex layer of legal compliance that, frankly, most people never consider when looking at their landscaping.
The legal side is a huge factor.
Because you don't have absolute sovereignty over a 50-foot tree just because it sits on your side of the property line.
Not at all. Landscaping, particularly in regions prone to natural disasters, is heavily regulated. For instance, CAL FIRE enforces strict defensible space guidelines.
Right, to prevent wildfires.
Exactly. They mandate the continuous management and proper disposal of hazardous brush and dead timber to mitigate wildfire fuel loads. A homeowner cannot legally leave a massive pile of dead ivy and timber just rotting in the sun.
It's a fire hazard.
And furthermore, municipalities like West Covina have distinct municipal ordinances designed to protect the local urban canopy.
Meaning, you might actually need a city permit to remove a tree that is actively rotting and threatens your own house.
You do. Depending on the species and the trunk diameter, the city often requires an official arborist's assessment proving the tree is a hazard before they will even issue a removal permit.
That's crazy.
And homeowners associations will also have their own strict architectural and landscaping compliance bylaws.
So if you just take a chainsaw to it on a Saturday,
You open yourself up to staggering municipal fines and civil liabilities. A professional service navigates that local compliance, secures the permits, and ensures the biomass is disposed of according to environmental regulations so the ivy doesn't just take root in a landfill.
it's remarkable how a single vine crawling up a trunk in West Covina unravels into this massive web of structural biomechanics, hydrotropism, and municipal law.
It's all connected.
It really is. And this is exactly why understanding these hidden systems is so vital for you, the listener. Whether your yard sits in heavy clay soil, battered by Santa Ana winds, or you're managing a mature landscape anywhere else in the world, recognizing the signs of biological failure allows you to intervene before a slow-motion decay turns into an explosive, catastrophic property loss.
It really requires us to abandon the idea of a yard as a finished architectural product.
Like, it's not just a painted wall or a piece of furniture.
Exactly. A landscape is not a static installation. It is an active, evolving environment driven by fierce competition for resources, shifting soil mechanics, and constant exposure to pathogens. Every tree, every root system, and every creeping vine is engaged in a continuous battle for structural dominance.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought to mull over. We've talked about the physics, the rot, and the historical weather patterns. But when you factor in the realities of our changing climate, where the weather whiplash of extended, brutal droughts is now followed by sudden, hyper-intense atmospheric rivers, the environmental stress on these mature trees is compounding exponentially.
The extremes are getting more extreme.
Exactly. And the slow-motion timeline of structural failure we've been discussing is rapidly accelerating. Those 50-year-old neighborhood trees might be turning into ticking time bombs far faster than historical data ever predicted.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. So the next time you step out your back door, take a closer look at that peaceful canopy and ask yourself, in this accelerating biological war zone, who is actually winning the turf war in your backyard right now?